Chapter 16. Learn from peers in other countries. Keep up your friendships abroad, and make new friends in other countries. The present difficulties in the United States are an element of a larger trend, and no country is going to find a solution by itself. Make sure you and your family have passports. In the year before the president was elected, American journalists were often mistaken about his campaign. He surmounted barrier after barrier and accumulated victory after victory. Our commentariat assured us that the next stage he would be stopped by one fine American institution or another. There was, meanwhile, one group of observers who took a different position. East Europeans, or those who studied Eastern Europe. To them, much about the president's campaign was familiar, and the final outcome no surprise. Ukrainian and Russian journalists who sniffed the air in the Midwest said more realistic things than American pollsters who had built a career on understanding the politics of the country. To Ukrainians, Americans seemed comically slow to react to the obvious threats of cyber warfare and targeted lies. When Russian propaganda made Ukraine a target in 2013, young Ukrainian journalists and others reacted immediately, decisively, and sometimes humorously with campaigns to expose disinformation. Russia deployed many of the same techniques against Ukraine that it later used against the United States, while invading Ukraine. When Russian media falsely claimed in 2014 that Ukrainian troops crucified a small boy, the Ukrainian response was rapid and effective, at least within Ukraine itself. When Russian media spread the story in 2016 that Hillary Clinton was ill because she mentioned an article on decision fatigue, which is not an illness, in an email, the story was spread by Americans. The Ukrainians won and the Americans lost, in the sense that Russia failed to get the regime it wanted in its neighbour, but did see its preferred candidate triumphant in the United States. This should give us pause. History, which for a time seemed to be running from west to east, now seems to be moving from east to west. Everything that happens here seems to have happened there first. The fact that most Americans do not have passports has become a problem for American democracy. Sometimes Americans say that they do not need travel documents because they prefer to die defending freedom in America. There are fine words, but they miss an important point. The fight will be a long one. Even if it does require sacrifice, it demands, first, sustained attention to the world around us, so that we know what we are resisting, and how best to do so. So having a passport is not a sign of surrender. On the contrary, it is liberating, since it creates the possibility of new experiences. It allows us to see how other people, sometimes wiser than us, react to similar problems. Since so much of what is happening now is familiar to the rest of the world or from recent history, we must observe and listen. Chapter 17. Listen for dangerous words. Be alert to the use of words extremism and terrorism. Be alive to the fatal notion of emergency and exception. Be angry about the treacherous use of patriotic vocabulary. The most intelligent of the Nazis, the legal theorist Carl Schmitt, explained in a clear language the essence of fascist governance. The way to destroy all rules, he explained, was to focus on the idea of exceptions. A Nazi leader outmaneuvers his opponents by manufacturing a general conviction that the present moment is exceptional, that transforming the state of exception into a permanent emergency. Citizens then trade a real freedom for fake security. When politicians today invoke terrorism, they are speaking, of course, of an actual danger. But when they try to train us to surrender freedoms in the name of safety, we should be on guard. There is no necessary trade off between the two. Sometimes we do indeed gain one by losing the other, and sometimes not. People who assure you that you can only gain security at the price of liberty usually want to deny you of both. You can certainly concede freedom without becoming more secure. The feeling of submission to authority might be comfortable, but it is not the same thing as actual safety. Likewise, gaining a bit of freedom may be unnerving, but this momentary unease is not dangerous. It is easy to imagine situations where we sacrifice both freedom and safety at the same time. When we enter an abusive relationship or vote for a fascist. Similarly, it is none too difficult to imagine choices that increase both freedom and safety, like leaving an abusive relationship or emigrating from a fascist state. It is the government's job to increase both freedom and security. Extremism certainly sounds bad, and governments often try to make it sound worse by using the words terrorism in the same sentence. But the word has little meaning. There is no doctrine called extremism. When tyrants speak of extremists, they just mean people who are not in the mainstream, as the tyrants themselves are defining that mainstream at a particular moment. Dissidents of the 20th century, whether they were resisting fascism or communism, were called extremists. Modern authoritarian regimes, such as Russia, use laws on extremism to punish those who criticize their policies. In this way, the notion of extremists come to mean virtually everything except what is, in fact, extreme: tyranny.